Okay, and we're live. Okay, hi, this is Aaron from Speed.Training, and today we have Matt Hawkins, a former Team USA player, former coach, and director of Serevi Rugby. Thanks a lot, Matt, for showing up.
No worries, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get into a little bit of your background as far as playing rugby. I know you've been in the rugby scene for quite a while, and just want to kind of get a background as far as how long you've been playing for.
So obviously we've been playing since I was a kid back in South Africa, but as far as what's gone on here in the States, I initially came out to the States sort of back in 2002, and then started playing sort of a little bit more full time back in 2004 with a club here in San Diego called OnBack, and that was sort of the start of it. And I've been playing ever since. Joined the sevens team back in sort of the '07 season and build up for the series, and was with the sevens team as far as a player goes. I played a little bit with the 15s team, got my cap with them back in sort of 2010 season. Retired from the game last year, 2013, and then turned over to coaching, and then just sort of coached for the last sort of year, and now have sort of essentially stepped away to a large extent from that team and from the USA sort of playing aspect, and now just trying to help develop out and build out the pathway that leads to those teams, because I think that's right now a huge void here in the US.
Okay. Now, describe some of the, I guess, the differences from playing overseas, since rugby is a worldwide sport, except in the U.S. So, what are some of those differences you've seen as a youth coming over, or younger, when you came over?
Well, I think there's just so many, and there's so many differences between, for example, what we have going on in North America versus what's going on down in South America. There's so much that is different between us and what's going on in Europe, and then even in Europe, there's so much that's different between what's going on in England, Wales, Ireland, and France. It's very different to what's going on in the Southern Hemisphere with sort of the Australians, New Zealanders, and South Africans. So it's really tough to really point out, for example, three specific differences. I think, obviously for us, professionalism is definitely one of the bigger ones. Through professionalism, that obviously breeds a little bit more commercial opportunity, and there's just more money to go around. Obviously, with that, then with the professional teams, you've got to be developing and breeding players to come into that professional sort of system. That obviously raises the level of rugby that we're playing. That's why you've got guys like Bain Scully, Chris Wiles, now Brett Thompson playing overseas, because they just get to be in a professional environment day in and day out with guys that are from that environment, that are able to challenge them each and every day further than they would be challenged here. So I think that's definitely a big piece to it. I think obviously their youth systems and how they build out their pathways from, for example, having SARU and SAFU, who sort of are the governing bodies of rugby in South Africa, and then you have the different provinces that feed into that governing body, and then sort of everything that develops underneath that, all the schools, the high schools, the junior schools, everything that feeds into those systems. There's a true infrastructure, and unfortunately that's something we don't have in place right now here.
And as far as the infrastructure that you mentioned, how long do you think it'll take for us to have something similar?
I think at the end of the day, right now, we've got a lot of people doing some incredible work. We've got some very, very passionate rugby people. It's just now sort of creating a little bit more synergy and collaboration between all of those entities. And that's from sort of third-party groups like ourselves, Serevi, to even territorial unions like Southern California Rugby or Southern California Youth Rugby. There just needs to be a little bit more synergy between all those groups, and collaboration. And that's going to allow us to build out this infrastructure. There's no one group that's going to be able to build out the whole thing on its own. America's just way too big. So we need to collaborate, we need to find common ground, and we need to build it out together for us to be successful.
Okay, now what are some of the I guess what are some of the differences that Serevi is trying to bring to the table here?
I think Serevi, at the end of the day, is really and truly, we're an add-on to what USA Rugby is trying to do. There are other companies out there similar to us, but I think unfortunately, we have the rugby IQ, the players, and also the financial backing to go out and really put our money where our mouth is. We are looking to build out the pathway. We're looking to build out a true sort of identification process for players, both in the male and female format, both in 7s and 15s. We want to see rugby be successful, but for us to do that, we have to jump in and we have to help USA Rugby. USA Rugby doesn't have the resource and doesn't have the finance to take it on itself. And I think also, too, to a certain extent, we look at ourselves as a group that wants to help that collaboration process, wants to help try and create synergy between groups, and start opening up those doors and having those conversations, because I think there's a lot of people that at the end of the day don't really want to have those conversations. So I think we're in a position where we're able to have those conversations and sort of allow people to engage and create a conduit that they can communicate through. So I think from the youth stuff, from the work that we do with the YMCA's, Boys and Girls Clubs, all the way up to our residency camps and our high performance talent identification camps, we're trying to cover the wide array of what rugby is in this country, and sort of really focus on the elite level and getting kids into a system and a pathway that allows them to be challenged and develop further than they would, essentially in their club environment. But also we're looking at the bottom end and, working with the whole fact that we want to, at the end of the day, grow the game. And the way we do that is by introducing the game to more kids, and not only introducing them, but keeping them active in the game, as any other sport would, versus sort of just coming out, doing a one session, say, all right, there's a rugby ball, have a look at it. We want to sort of engage them more, and we want to engage them consistently.
Okay. Now, have you met any resistance from, say, a lot of the football coaches or the different sports teams?
I think that it really depends on where in the country you're looking at. I mean, even if you just look here in San Diego, San Diego is booming as far as, youth rugby goes, high school rugby. And there's certain clubs that have great relationships with their football coaches, specifically at the high school level, and then sort of Pop Warner, and then there's others that don't. So I think that's I wouldn't say it's a generic problem. I would say it's just something that it really just depends. I think the video that's come out recently from the Seahawks, with regards to their tackling technique and how they've introduced sort of more of a rugby philosophy to how they do it, I think that's significant, and I think that's going to start to help break down barriers between ourselves and specifically football. But I think we've got to understand, before us, there was soccer, there was lacrosse, there were a couple other things that have come along and stolen, the athletes, and we don't know how that was done. We don't know how each one of these coaches were affected, and so, we're having to deal with that history. And I think, for us, I really believe the coach sees what we bring to the table and sees that we're actually going to enhance his athlete. But I think overall in the US, there's also a shift happening slowly here where, we're shifting our kid from playing, one or two sports to trying to be sort of a multi-sport athlete. I've got two kids that are 6 and 4, and my kids play football, they play rugby, they play soccer, they play baseball, they swim. I mean, they do karate, they do everything. We want to keep them busy and keep them active in everything we can. And the goal with that is that at some point they will really gravitate to whichever one they really enjoy. And between the two of them, hopefully they both play rugby, but one might play rugby and one might play water polo. I just don't know. But I want them out there playing as much as they can and learning, and developing as athletes in every sphere that they can.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a conversation we had in one of our groups on Facebook last night. One of the coaches at an inner city school here in LA has problems with the basketball coaches. They don't want their kids to go and play football. They want them to play year round. Same thing with the girls playing softball or volleyball. Their coaches want them to play year round, and that really affects their development.
Well, and you know what, like, for example, I've been chatting to a lot of the clubs here. If you look at a kid that's playing youth rugby and to where essentially Southern California is built out to, it's a lot more mature than some of the other sort of territories out there. But, their season starts kind of middle to late November. As far as the 15 season goes, it runs through until about, depending on what age group you are, but, sort of through to about April. They then have May off, and then they play summer sevens for June, July. And so if you're looking at that, that's already, you're at 6, 7, 8 months, in a year, just playing sort of your youth rugby. So we've built our way up to that already. So we can't, we can't really. We've got to be smart about how we engage in that conversation, because we've got a pretty lengthy season, and obviously that it's broken up. Don't get me wrong; it's not sort of back to back to back, but it is a substantial amount of time, and those are things that we've got to be aware of, and just understanding how we fit in with everyone else, but also stay current in that conversation of creating a multi-sport athlete.
Absolutely. So, want to kind of get into your experience as far as playing with with Team USA, and I guess what is there that some of these younger athletes can look forward to that experience.
Well, I think at the end of the day, playing for your country, there's no bigger honor. As I've told people, I mean, specifically now, if you're playing for the US, you're not playing for money, right? It's very different. You going and playing for the Eagles versus playing, for the Philadelphia Eagles. There's a very different sort of matchup there, running out, at Hong Kong with 45,000 screaming people, and you've got you and basically 11 other mates, and you're going to go out and you're going to compete. I think that there's nothing that you can really compare to that as an athlete, specifically as a rugby player. And when you start to look at things like the World Cups, Pan American Games, Olympics, those are just experiences as an athlete that no matter how much money you have, you can't buy that. That's just something that specific athletes compete their whole lives to get that opportunity and then go and experience it. And those are very, very few and far between. So from my side of things, every time I got the opportunity to play in the jersey, that was it. We always talked about, it's not getting the jersey, it's what you do in the jersey. And I think, there's a lot of pieces to it. It's in front of your country, you're playing for your country, you've got your name on your back, so that's, you're playing for your family. There's just a lot that comes with it, and I think it's embracing all of those things and just going out and basically competing one-on-one and saying, I'm better than you and I'm going to go and prove it. So as a younger athlete, it's a long road, and it's not an easy road. And we've got maybe 4,500 to 5,000 youth kids playing here, in Southern California. Now, how many of those kids put on an Eagles jersey at the end of the day? I can't tell you, but it's not going to be all 5,000 of them. So the few that get through, the few that get to the top, and the few that get that honor, it's really special. And that's why there's such a drive to play for your national team, because it is such a, it's just not one that gets experienced by everyone.
Now, how was how was the transition going from coach or from player to coach?
I think if you're talking player to coach with the national team, that was a very different experience from just I still coached while I was playing, so I'd been coaching for many years. The first time I coached was when I was 17 years old. So I've been coaching for a long time. As far as the national team goes, to be honest, it wasn't a lot of time to really think about it. Things happened sort of June, July, with the sort of the status quo of the Sevens program. And we were essentially kicking off again, September 1st. So that really only gave us, the month of August to sort of figure it out. And as I say, the transition, it wasn't something that I'd been sitting for 9 months thinking about. That wasn't the case, right? I'd had my mind on the World Cup and going to the World Cup and competing at the World Cup, So that was first and foremost. And once you sort of got out of that, then there was this turn and focus to, okay, well, our program as a whole is missing a link, and can I fill that link, and I think, there were multiple conversations that were had, and then at that point, once we all kicked off, I think it was September 2nd of 2013, we had 3 weeks before we got on a plane for our first tour, so it really wasn't time to sort of sit and twiddle our thumbs. It was, really and truly just, getting around and having a look at what's out there, trying to get the guys into the training center and then getting us prepared to go and compete. So, that's essentially where we found ourselves. So, that changeover, that transition, whether it was a good or a bad thing, there just wasn't a lot of time, so it was just sort of embracing my new role and taking it head on and finding the supporters to get behind me and get the job done.
Okay, so now you're like I said, you're more into the player development. So what is Serevi doing, Serevi Rugby doing to really help increase the quality of our athletes here?
Well, I think overall, I think there's two very, very definitive roles that Serevi plays. The one is growing the game. So that's being very active in engaging with young kids at multiple levels, whether it be, sort of the real youth to elementary to middle to high school, and getting kids into the game, but then providing an environment, a system, a platform for them to stay consistently engaged with rugby. So, that's first and foremost. So in that, if you look at improving the athlete, well, we're hoping to draw more athletes and better athletes at a younger age, so that once they do get to the point, for example, you get a kid that's 12 years old, he engages with rugby for 2 to 3 years. He understands the fundamentals and the basics of rugby. He then feels that he could be a great high school football player. So he really commits to being a football player. By the end of high school, he figures out it's not really going to work out. He doesn't get the scholarship that he thought he would get to a college. Well, now he's got those 3 years under his belt, but he's developed himself as a phenomenal athlete chasing his football dream. Now he can essentially create synergy between those two and take that on and now go to college with all these varsity programs popping up all over the place, use that, go to a college program, and now he's leaps and bounds ahead of the current sort of crossovers that we're getting, And now we've got a much better athlete with a much better, mental skill set, but also, a rugby skill set that we as a coach can manipulate, but, push further and challenge more than we can currently. So that's one piece to it. The second piece to it is creating the opportunity of talent identification camps, because if you look at essentially the geography in the States, it's really hard for a coach, and even if he's got, 3 or 4, assistants with him, to cover the whole of the States, to get to every tournament, to get to every, championship that's going on. And even in that, you might have a guy that's a phenomenal player. He's had an incredible season, and that one weekend is just not his weekend. He just doesn't have the weekend that he's supposed to have. He tweaks his hamstring and can't play that weekend. There's just so many factors that play into it that you can't manage without consistency. And that's sort of where we're looking to do, is to create a true pathway that is consistent but also sustainable. So it's something that's going to be around for the next 50 years, very similar to what soccer has in play. And then from that, we're able to develop other pieces to it, the professional game, the academies, but all of those things, have to be structured in a sense that we can be pushing people towards our national programs. And that starts with the high school All-Americans, it builds into the college All-Americans, and that goes into the U20s, and then it goes into our national team. So there are different levels within the national team, but then we have to create levels below that and within that, and it has to be supported some way. And USA Rugby, at the end of the day, their job is to make sure that our national teams are winning and are successful. And as Serevi, we're looking to take on the other job of getting the kids into the pipeline that then USA Rugby can really challenge and push further to compete against the best in the world and have us, moving up in the world rankings.
Okay. Now with the with sevens being included in the 2016 Olympics, have you guys seen a boost in people wanting to play rugby or more inquiries about it?
I think, as far as that goes, I have two sort of opinions on it. I think the first opinion is, as a rugby person, when you're walking into a YMCA or you're walking into a high school or you're talking to a football coach, the marketability of the Olympics just makes that conversation that much easier. So your foot in the door saying this is an Olympic sport, it just makes it so much easier than this is a sport called rugby. Well, what does that mean? Well, no, it's an Olympic sport. That changes, and specifically in this country, we are very, very patriotic, but at the same time, the Olympics means a hell of a lot to us, and all we have to do is look at NBC's coverage and how they cover anything and everything, but it's all American, That's what it is, and that's a really good thing for us and for that conversation. The second piece to it is, I think a lot of people are looking at 2016 as sort of this, that's it, that's the big finale. Hey, 2016, it's Olympics, and for me personally, that's the start of the book. That's the start of the story. When it finally is in the Olympics, for the global game, but also for our game, that is the start of the next evolution of rugby, and specifically for our sort of country. So I think for me, it's the start of the story, whereas I think a lot of people seem to think of it as sort of the end of the story. Those are sort of my two opinions, and I'm sure you could ask multiple different people about it, and they'll have different sort of views on it. But that's sort of mine.
Okay. Now, what kind of advice would you give for children to get physically and mentally ready for rugby?
I think rugby at the end of the day is like any other sport. If you really want to excel at it, your body has to be, in a condition to excel. Whether that's swimming, whether that's football, whether it's soccer. If you're physically not capable of playing at a high level, you're just not going to be able to. It doesn't matter how strong you are mentally. So I think as your body goes, physically you have to look after yourself, and that if that's getting fit, if that's the strength and conditioning element, if that's the recovery element, if that's the nutritional element, there's many different pieces that go into making sure that your body can work, right? It's just like, I don't know, look at Formula One. It's taking a Formula One car and then go grab a BMW 3 Series and now chucking them out there to do a Grand Prix. The BMW 3 Series it's not made to do that, right? It's not made to be a Formula One car, and that's the Formula One car is going to win that race. So first and foremost, that's what you got to get right? You've got to get that tool, that mechanism that's going to allow you to play the game. The second piece is, putting the driver in those two cars. Well, the better driver, a guy like Michael Schumacher, who was around for years and won multiple championships, mentally he was just so strong and was just such a good driver and had such a good skill set that when you teamed him up with, with that performance car, he was able to do, very, very special things. And, that's the same, with sport. You've got to make sure that your body is in position to be able to go do those, incredible things and take on those challenges. But then mentally, you have to be prepared, and you need to understand that it's going to take a lot of work. There's a lot of preparation. There's a lot of work that needs to be done over and over again to build up your skills, to put in the extra work. Because there are a lot of people with talent. There are a lot of people that will push themselves to a certain point. But it's those that are willing to go further than anyone else, but also have done the preparation to go further than everyone else. Because if you ask any player, hey, would you be willing to go an extra 100 meters in a sprint? And, is that something you do? A lot of kids will say, yeah, I'll do that. But it's actually being able to do that and having prepared yourself to do that. So I think that's sort of the biggest thing. And one of the things that we will always struggle with here in the US is, a lot of the US sports, if you look at football and baseball, they're very coach driven. The coach, provides the structures and the players play within the structures. Rugby, it's slightly different. It is, to a large extent, more of a player's game, and it is player driven. And that means that, you've got to go get a ball and, go outside and kick it around and practice your kicking skills and find a mate and be playing touch and, using your time more wisely, if I can call it that, not waiting to get to practice and then your coach to point out stuff and then for you to sort of fulfill those drills. There's a lot of stuff that you as a player can be doing on your own.
Yeah, I find rugby to be very similar to basketball in that aspect, where many times the players can go out and they're really the ones that are controlling the game, and very few times does the coach actually get to call a play. And it's them running it, doing what they know how to do.
Yes.
So as far as coaching, what mistakes have you seen some of our youth rugby coaches making, and what is there that we can do to get better?
I don't think there's too many mistakes. At the end of the day, I don't think there's one right way or wrong way. I don't think that's what you have in rugby. I think overall, what do we lack? We have athletes. That's what we have in this country, because generally all the kids that are playing rugby are playing other sports, and we're athletic. We have a very athletic nation. The piece to that we need to develop is the individual skill sets for specifically rugby. If you look like at a quarterback or any football position, they have very, very specific skill sets that they develop out for that position, but they work day in and day out to perfect those skill sets so that they can go to the combine and they can essentially show off those skill sets and then go off and make their millions of dollars. We need the same thing. We need kids willing to work day in and day out to perfect their skill set. They're never going to be perfect. Not even the best player in the world is perfect. But that's that striving for perfection is what's going to get us to where we need to be. And then the second piece to that, is really and truly, our kids. Mentally, that's where we fall a little bit short. We don't watch as much rugby. We don't, a lot of our parents weren't rugby players, and it's just learning those little nuances and watching rugby day in and day out. Like, your dad watches football, he's always watching football. He's watching the football highlights, and that's with rugby, is just really learning the game, because that's where we kind of fall short, is more our mental sort of piece on the game, understanding what's sort of developing in front of us and being able to understand that, but then also counteract it, or develop something that we can use to exploit what's going on. I think that's where we're a little bit slower than some of the other nations, and that plays hand in hand with our skill set, because if we're not so worried about what we're doing skill-wise, we can focus more on what's going on in front of us.
Okay. Now, with Serevi, do you guys hold camps nationwide?
Yes. So currently, a lot of what we do is, we have two, major local offices in Washington and then California. And then outside of that, in our partnership with USA Rugby, we've built out these talent identification camps, and then also our high performance residency camps, which take place during the summer at this point. Now, those are all nationwide, and the whole goal of that is to get to as many parts of the states as possible, so we can draw in as many kids as possible, to see as many kids, so we can start then plugging them into different systems, but also tracking, in the Northeast, what's going on there, what's going on in the Midwest, what's going on here in California, and be able to sort of also, at the end of the day, start to create data that lets us know, where are our kids, physically, but also mentally, in what they're able to do and what they're not able to do, and then start to help those coaches in those areas to build that out and become better and challenge the athletes that they have.
Now, one of the things that I've come across is for us here, our fear of rugby. And asking anyone, even guys that have played football, and they look at rugby and think it's insane.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's like anything, right? You look at football, and I'd say football outside of the UFC is probably the largest contact sport in America. Now, in that, the second you take away pads, everything changes, right? It's like giving you a skateboard and putting you on the top of a half pipe and dressing you head to toe with helmet, pads, the whole deal, and being dared to sort of drop down that half pipe. I would say you'd probably give it a go, But now if I chucked you out there and said, all right, there's a skateboard, that's it, do the same thing, your concerns are going to be a lot greater, and your freedom to sort of say, okay, I'll give it a try, that starts to fall away, and I think that's where it more sort of builds to, is just the fact that, Americans in general love contact. They love, two people basically matching up against each other, and you can see the growth of the UFC, just exploits a lot of that, but there is a fundamental difference between you and me running head to head with pads on and without pads. But a lot of that is built in through the technique, through rugby. You learn from a young age, well, when I'm going head on into a guy, I'm not going to chuck my head into him. I'm going to use my shoulder. I've got my legs underneath me. That gives me power. I'm going to wrap up. There's a lot of technical pieces to it that allow me to do that, and that's just like the UFC. I mean, those guys don't jump into the cage and start killing each other. That's not how it works, right? There's a lot of technical background to that, and that's why some guys are really great standing up. That's why some guys are really good submission experts, and they want to get people on the ground. There's a lot of technical play that comes into it, and I think football as a whole, that's their biggest piece that they could probably sort of learn from, is just the tackle piece, to just getting a little bit more technical. I think right now it's just smash and grab. Let's just throw everything at it and hopefully the ball pops out somewhere. Whereas I think if a little bit more technique, like the Seahawks showed, it's a little bit easier to manage, but also at the same time it actually becomes something that you're going to be more effective at. So. From my side of things, I think there will always be a certain I wouldn't say fear, but definitely sort of a concern around the fact that there is contact with our pads. But I think specifically if you look at the youth game and you speak to the moms and the dads, I mean, they love the fact that there's like a technical piece to it. They love the fact that the boys are all engaged, whether it be attack, defense, and they're actually learning to do something the right way. And I think it's going to get bigger and better. I think that sort of barrier is going to be broken down pretty quickly over the next sort of 5 to 7 years, and I don't think that fear will exist anymore.
Now, you mentioned the 5 to 7 years. Is that when you think that we'll be ready for a professional league?
I think a professional league is going to happen sooner than that. That's my personal feeling. But at the same time, it's like creating the Olympic development academies that we've got in place. We need them. They need to happen. I just don't know if we're mature enough to really execute them efficiently and in the right manner. But that's where we've got to build to. It's just where we were 10 years ago. We had to put things in place that we weren't quite ready yet, but we had to build into them. And it's kind of like, my kids now. I don't buy them the shirt that's going to fit them today. I'm going to buy them the shirt that fits them 6 months from now, because he's going to grow into it. And there's certain parts of our game that we need to sort of put in place and grow into it. And then there's other parts where we've actually got to take a step back and say, wait, hold on. We might need to take 2 steps backwards before we take 3 steps forwards type thing. So I think it's having a strategy in place and a plan to really be able to understand where we're going in certain spheres of the game, and then get the right people and the right resources in place to create the infrastructure to build it out the right way.
Okay. Now, what is your what would be your timeline as far as getting Team USA ranked in the top 5 in the world?
Are we talking 7s, 15s?
I'll just say 7.
Well, I think, look, I think right now the ladies are, they're way ahead of us as far as where they stand in the rankings. I would hope that pretty soon they're in the top 3. I mean, you look at sort of the 15s World Cup that just happened with the women. I mean, that was crazy with what Ireland did, and then England winning and Canada making it to the top 3. I mean, there's a lot going on in the women's game, and I believe we have the people in place here in America to really accelerate the women's game and have us sitting in the top 3 for both, 7s and 15s. So I would hope that happens and happens pretty soon. In the men's game, the 7s, there's a lot that needs to take place. But can we be one of the top 5 countries in the world? Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. I believe that wholeheartedly, and would be very disappointed if that's not something that we end up doing, within the next, I'd say 5 to 10 years. It can happen sooner, but there's a lot that's involved. It's not just putting a coach and putting players. There's a lot of infrastructure around it. There's a lot of planning strategy. There's a lot that needs to take place, and there's a lot of build out below it with these talent identification camps and capturing the right athletes to put in place to then develop to a point where they are actually able to compete on that World Series. So there's just a lot more, but do I believe we can be? Absolutely. How long? I mean, I can't tell you that because I don't know what strategy is in place, and I don't know what the plan is. As far as the 15s goes, I think that the 15s game as a whole is, we've struggled, I think, a lot because our guys have to go play overseas for them to get better and to really excel in that professional environment. But unfortunately, that's just so few and far between. Where if we can create something like that here in the States, we're going to give more guys that opportunity. We're going to have more people pushing those guys that are here and challenging them. It gives us a better environment to actually be developing a national 15s team. But then it also is, how do we tie in the U20s and the U20s, and how do they come through? How do you look then below that in the high school All-Americans? How do they come through, and where do we put them? The college game as a whole is growing out significantly. There's varsity programs popping up. Those are really, really important. The high school game, we need to get them, state sanctioned. We need to get them, as sort of on-school sports versus sort of a off-school club sport. We start to put all of those things in place, and very quickly here we're going to get some incredible athletes. It's then becomes, how do we capture those athletes, how do we identify them, and how do we manage them as they build up through those different levels, and make sure we maximize their capabilities. Because we might get one guy that at 18 he is incredible, he's a stud, but by 22 he's had his peak and he's done. You might get another kid that at 18 he's not much to look at, but by 22 he's going to peak and he's going to be something special. Now those two people provide a huge resource towards our team, but how do we manage those two? Because that's a very, very different process, and right now there isn't a process to do that, and there is no infrastructure to support that.
Okay. Now, have you seen more interest from sponsors, the big sponsors, especially the U.S. ones?
I mean, I would think that we could go out and get really big sponsors. That from my side of things, I sat on the USA board. I don't know who's asking what questions and what's being asked of them, right? So I don't know. I mean, we've obviously just had the changeover from Canterbury to BLK with regards to our kit sponsor. What happens with Fly Emirates? Do we get other sponsors? Are our teams broken out? Does 15s and 7s sort of essentially split in some sort of instances and get different sponsors? I don't know. I don't know what the plan, the strategy is behind it. But my assumption would be, we've got some incredible companies here in the States, and for us to draw on them for $1 million or $2 here and there to support the programming, I think is possible, but it's all about selling. It's about creating something that they need or want to be a part of. And as I say, that's something that I haven't had a lot to do with.
Okay. Now, is there anything that us as local rugby coaches can do to really help, I guess, grow the game and kind of push it towards the right direction?
I think every local coach at the end of the day is incredibly passionate, right? Because they're volunteers. So they love this game, and that's why they're engaging. That's why they're involved. So from my side of things, I mean, the only thing that guys can do is just continue to educate themselves, because the more they educate themselves, the better they can educate the kids that they're bringing into the game, but also the better they can educate the kids that are currently in the game. So that is first and foremost for me, making sure that really and truly I know as much as I can know. I've had multiple conversations with coaches when, for example, like the Super 15s going on and all the European rugby, and you ask the guys, how much of that rugby do you watch? And you get a couple guys, oh, watch a couple of highlights, oh yeah, maybe watch this game. That's opportunity to learn, but then also really engage with it, figure out who's doing what, why they're doing it, look at specific, positions and what they're doing. I tell the guys, I watch every single game. And, yes, I've got a TiVo, so I can fast forward here and there, but I watch every single game, and I'm looking at who's doing what, why they're doing it, trying to pick up patterns between the different teams, between, the different sort of halfbacks, what are the loose forwards doing, how are they breaking down defenses, but then also how are defenses attacking, attack now, and those are things that we have to do. In this country, we'll make a point of watching our basketball game or watching our football game or, whatever support, team that we support. But we've got to do that too with rugby, especially if we are the educators educating, the youth on this game. So that would always be my thing. I mean, the guys are incredibly passionate, and I take my hat off to them. I think they, fantastic, that they've created the ability to grow this game the way it's grown, over the last sort of 10, 12 years that I've seen. It's now just making sure that, they continue to educate themselves and make sure that they know as much as they need to know to sort of impart that wisdom, on the kids that they essentially are educating.
Okay. Now, as far as you coaching now, you said your kids are, they're young, they're still growing up. Do you see yourself coaching them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was out with them last year. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my change in life right now has been significant. I was traveling so much for so long, and it's incredible. Like, I've got soccer practice with my boys this afternoon. And so for me, it's an exhilarating thing to be able to be at the soccer games on Saturday and screaming and shouting on the sideline and, helping coach them. And, with their rugby, they both played rugby last year, to be engaged in that and watch them play. And, I had that growing up. I had both my grandfathers and my dad screaming and shouting at me, telling me what to do, like I told people, I mean, even when I was playing on the circuit, I would come off the field and I would have maybe 20 text messages from my dad telling, hey, why didn't you do this? What about this guy? Why didn't you do that? So it's something that's been a part of my life for so long. And, my dad's incredibly passionate about the game. And I think that's a lot of where I get it from, and so I want to be that for my kids now, when whatever sport they're playing, try and become as best I can. I mean, I went and got them American footballs the other day and, was watching YouTube videos on the right arm action to throw a football, and now I'm trying to teach them, and that's where I see myself with them, right? I'm there. I need to educate them through life and provide a platform for them to be successful in that, but also in any sport they play, I want to educate myself and make sure that I know enough to be able to teach them and for them to learn. So for me, real exciting time, and I'm enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun, and it's that's the best part about it, is working with kids, but specifically your own, and seeing them grow and seeing them love the sport just as much as you do,
Okay. Now, for with Serevi Rugby, how do they get a hold of you? How do they find out, our players find out where your camps are, or anything like that?
Everything's on our website. We've got an incredible website. We've got an exceptional team that works on that, making sure that that's updated and the information is essentially first and foremost, there for our customers, for the players. So SereviRugby.com. It's got everything on there. It's got everything about us as coaches, our bios, what we're into, what the camps, what camps we have coming up. Everything's there. It's an incredible resource. I would basically just point everyone in that direction. My contact details are also on there, as well as all the other coaches. So for any specific reason you can't get what you're looking for, you're more than welcome to contact us directly, and then we can help you out from there.
Great. Now, what is there? Anything you want to leave our viewers with? Any advice? Any words of wisdom?
I mean, I think we've covered a lot. I think at the end of the day, I mean, things just to understand is that rugby is a growing game. It's gonna need a lot of passionate people to continue to build out the game the way it is. But we've got to start looking to collaborate as much as we can with each other to make sure that we're getting this thing right, sort of system wide versus just in our little pocket. But I would just continue to encourage guys to invite other parents out and get more people involved, get more people engaged at the game. Reach out to people if you can't figure something out, or if you need something. Reach out to people and let's help each other out. Let's, at the end of the day, we're in this together. When the U.S. team qualifies and goes to the Olympics, all of our hopes and dreams ride on those 12 guys, and at the end of the day, at some point, we're going to have an impact on that, and we've got to just continue to do that and continue to give everything we can towards that, because that's what's going to make the difference, So, we're in for a roller coaster ride here over the next 2 years, but I think it's going to be a fun one. I think it's going to be a successful one, and we've all just got to jump behind our national teams and support them and support that infrastructure and continue to help build it out,
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks for giving us your time. We really appreciate it. And what we will also do is we'll be putting your link on our page right below this interview, so anyone that's missed it, they'll be able to go ahead and hop on and watch everything.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Have a great day.
Uh-huh.